Welcome to the Newsome MMA podcast, partnered with Heavy Duty Fight Management. I'm your host, as always, Newsome, with your co-host John, and tonight we're going to be breaking down UFC on ESPN Plus 10 from Rochester, New York. John, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. I'm really looking forward to this card. Actually, it's stacked with action fights, in my opinion. Bit upset about the obvious news that Magny against Luque has been pulled, with Magny pulling out, unfortunately, because I was really looking forward to that fight. But man, there's still some exciting matchups on this card, and I'm expecting some wild fights and some good finishes.
Yeah, for sure, I agree as well, and especially with Luque, they are still trying to find a short notice opponent for him. But
Yeah.
to be honest with you, I'll be surprised if anybody steps up 3 days away from having to weigh in and then fighting a beast like Luque. So credit if anyone does take that call up, but I think it's quite unlikely at this point. And it's also the final fight card before the week break leading into UFC Stockholm too, so we all get a nice week off. Well, some of you do anyway. But before we start, as always, thank you to all the listeners, followers and subscribers to this podcast. We've got plenty of platforms where you can catch this show across YouTube, iTunes, Spotify and SoundCloud. So please subscribe to make sure that you never miss an episode. And with that said, let's break down some fights at UFC Rochester. And we enter the Showtime Fights. The first Showtime fight tonight is the main event. We've got Rafael dos Anjos against Kevin Lee, debuting at 170. John, who have you got?
Yeah, the first Showtime fight, and how could we avoid the main event for this one? It's going to be a really exciting fight, I think. I'm really looking forward to seeing Kevin Lee up in that welterweight division now, because he's struggled with the weight cutting previously. I know he did make weight against Alo Quinta, but he struggled prior to that against Barboza, and he's struggling in a few of his fights, and you can kind of tell as the fights are wearing on. Tony Ferguson, of course, he struggled to make weight, and then there's the fact that he had that staph infection as well. That certainly didn't help him in the slightest. But I really think this move up to 170 is very smart for him. I think it's going to pay dividends in the long run for sure. Now, saying that, this fight it's a really close fight, and the betting lines that I've seen have suggested so as well, because there's a blueprint there for how to defeat Rafael dos Anjos, and that's pressure wrestling. We've seen that in the losses to Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington in his last two fights. We saw the pressure that Eddie Alvarez put on him when Alvarez defeated him to win the belt. I know that was a couple of years ago, and obviously the lower weight class of lightweight. On a side note, that's possibly one of my favourite finishes ever, because as you know, I'm not a massive betting man myself, but I actually won a 7-fight parlay on that card with Eddie Alvarez topping up. So for me, I was showering in money that night, and in comparison to some of the guys listening to this, it's probably pittance, but for me, I was living the big life for one night only.
Man, I don't think I've ever hit anything more than like 4 or 5 legs in a parlay. So
it was complete luck. Do you know when you just think, oh yeah, I'm just going to throw like a couple of quid at like a ridiculous amount of fights, yeah, and then it actually came in, and I was sitting there in disbelief at like 4:30 in the morning that I'd actually managed to luckily pull it off. But yeah, nothing of the same since. Hence why the betting slowly slowed down. But yeah, back to the fight itself. It's, like I said, the blueprint there is for how to defeat dos Anjos, and that's with the pressure wrestling, getting backing up against the fence, back against the fence, and then work for the takedown. And Kevin Lee, we know that his strength is his wrestling game, and that really is where he will aim to win this fight. I think he will try to utilize that blueprint that Usman and Covington and Alvarez have shown before. And I think he'll try to wear RDA down. I think he'll try and wrestle him. I think he'll try and grind him and make this an ugly, nasty, scrappy fight that we know RDA has struggled with previously. But it all depends on, for me, these first couple of rounds, because dos Anjos, although he hasn't got great takedown defense, it's good. Usman and Covington are two of the best wrestlers in the UFC. I mean, he's fought Khabib as well, if you're going back, and these are some of the best wrestlers in the UFC. Full stop. I mean, they're not just your average good wrestler; they're exceptional, top quality wrestlers. And we saw what Usman did to Woodley in their fight as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see whether RDA could stuff those early takedowns, and if he does stuff them, and it kind of just turns into a standard battle, I think it's going to be really, really close, and it could genuinely go either way, and I think it will go 5 rounds, and I think it could go either way. With that being said, I am picking Kevin Lee to win this fight. I think the move up to 170 is going to be fantastic for him physically. I think he'll be a completely different fighter to the one we've seen in his couple of his assets, especially the Iaquinta fight. I think his energy levels will be superb. I think he'll be strong. I think he will be able to push the pace. I mean, he went hard rounds with Iaquinta. Went 5 hard rounds with Raging Al, and his cardio stood up. I mean, he went 5 rounds with Barbosa as well, and just that move up, I think, will give him that new lease of life. I think he will be able to wear on Dos Anjos against the fence. I think he will be able to take him down at points and be able to keep him down, just notching up the score in the judges' eyes. And yet, ultimately, I do think he will be able to do enough of the pressure wrestling that is Dos Anjos' kryptonite, and I think Dos Anjos will be backed up against the fence, and I think he's going to struggle to get any breathing space to keep this fight standing and to make it a stand-up war. So for that reason, I'm going with Kevin Lee to win this fight, and I think he's going to win by decision.
Yeah, man, this is a tough fight because you've got Kevin Lee coming up to 170. You would assume that, you know, because he's had difficult weight cuts in the past, that a move up to 170 will really favour him. But the one thing that a lot of people seem to overlook when fighters move up a division is the extra weight, the extra muscle mass that they're carrying up there. It can sometimes have an adverse effect with them,
of course,
you know, with them tiring. Because they've got more muscle. Yes, they've had less of a weight cut, which is great. But sometimes you see that when fighters move up, they have that one fight, that first fight, where, you know, they're sort of learning. They're learning a little bit more about themselves. Obviously, carrying more weight into the fight, and then you slowly see them starting to progress a little bit better and a little bit better each fight after that. But then on the flip side, you also see some fighters step up and just look great instantly because that move up in weight is what they needed. And like I say, we're not sure exactly what we're going to get with Kevin Lee from the physical respect, but from a stylistic respect, we know exactly what we're going to get from Kevin Lee. He's going to be smart using his strikes. He's going to be trying to get his timing down early on. He's going to be mixing in kicks with his punches, and just ultimately making the right reads so he can enter for the takedowns without getting himself into too much danger. And then from the flip side with RDA, you know, RDA spent a little time at welterweight now. I actually don't think he's done or washed up like some suggest. You know, I don't think it's a consensus by any means, but I also think that RDA has still got a lot to give in the division for sure. And, you know, you look at his last 4 losses, you've mentioned it, Usman, now champion, Colby Covington, who will be running that division with Usman in the future, Tony Ferguson, Eddie Alvarez, you know, obviously those were down at lightweight, but, you know, the dude only loses to top level competition. And his kryptonite and his deficiency throughout his career has always been that pressure wrestler. And, you know, like we say, we're going back to the Eddie Alvarez fight, Khabib, Colby, Kamaru, all these guys that have beaten him have all got that thing in common. And it's tough from this respect as well, because although it's a deficiency in his game, his takedown defense isn't actually that bad. You've touched upon it as well, John. You know, he isn't taken down easily. He does make these guys work. He does make them push on him. He does make them, you know, if they take him down, he stands back up and he makes him take him down again. And it's all little things that can drain your cardio. And then you go back to the flip side with Kevin Lee, and if he does have problems with the extra muscle mass inside the cage, and RDA keeps standing back up every time he's being taken down, then, you know, that's going to turn the tide in the fight as the fight goes on. And there's just for me, there's quite a few question marks in this fight, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. Ultimately, I feel that I feel that the best way to beat RDA is the blueprint that Colby and Kamaru laid down, and that's just a constant pace and a constant pressure on him. So not giving him a moment's space. You know, if you take him down, he gets back up, or if he manages to find an angle and exit, then press him again, press him back against the cage, then try and take him down again, and just rinse and repeat for 5 rounds. Colby played it absolutely perfectly, but still RDA didn't look that bad, and this is what I mean. It's quite strange. He's got a deficiency that he tends to not be too deficient at it. He's a good fighter, and I think if the fight does stay on the feet, I think if he can stay vertical, or I think if he can keep standing up, I think as the longer the fight goes on, from a striking perspective, RDA definitely has the edge in this fight. You know, under Master Rafael Cordero, his Muay Thai is just impeccable, and like I say, I think he's a better striker than Kevin Lee. But weirdly, having said all this, I'm actually going to go with Kevin Lee as well, and I'm actually going to take him via decision also, because I've just got a feeling that it's not going to be one of those situations where Kevin Lee moves up and he gasses horrifically because of the extra muscle mass. I do think that he needed the move up. He's been calling for a 165-pound division for a while now, and I think that's just because he wants the best of both worlds. He doesn't want to face the bigger guys, but in that respect, he doesn't want the massive weight cut either. But with RDA, he's also an ex-lightweight, so he's not a big welterweight either. So I feel that Kevin Lee may get a sort of 165-pound fight at 170, if that makes sense, in regards to the person that's going to be standing on the opposite side of the cage to him. And I think he's gonna really flourish in this fight. I do think he's gonna drop a couple of rounds, because I do think his timing's gonna take a little while. I do think RDA has decent takedown defense in the grand scheme of things, and like I've already mentioned, his get-up game is also very good as well. But I do think Kevin Lee can rinse and repeat. I honestly think he had a really weird fight against Al Aikens, and you know, I say this time and time again, people write fighters off so easily when they have a bad performance, but it doesn't matter what sport you're in, whether it be MMA, whether it be boxing or football, American football, whatever it is. Athletes have off days. They have days that even the best athletes in the world, they have days where, or nights where they just don't perform, and that's, you know what, that's because they're a human being and they can't be at the top of the game every single time we see them. And I just think that Kevin Lee had an off night against Al Aikens. You know, I'm not taking anything away against Al, but you know, on a different night it might have ended up a little bit differently. Who knows? I think Kevin Lee is going to flourish from the lack of weight cut. I think he's going to be healthier. I think he's going to be fitter. He's going to be in better shape. And I do think that over the 5 rounds that he can land enough takedowns and have enough top time to steal the fight. So I'm going to go with Kevin Lee too, and I'm also going to take him to win via decision. Now, in the next Showtime fight, we've got Shoeface Antonio Carlos Jr. versus Ian Heinisch. John, who have you got?
Yeah, for me, this is again really good matchmaking by the UFC. I'm really looking forward to this fight. Obviously, we know Ian Heinisch was scheduled to fight my boy Tom Breeze back in March. Unfortunately, that didn't happen day of the fight, and he's got a really exciting fight now against Shoeface, who's a very dangerous opponent. And again, it's a tough fight to call, because Ian Heinisch did really well in his UFC debut against Cesar Ferreira. Obviously, we know what Cesar Ferreira's bread and butter is, and that's his jiu-jitsu. And Heinisch nullified that well. Although he got taken down, I think it was 4 times in that fight, he got back to his feet. He managed to scramble well. He defended submissions well off his back. And then when he got back to his feet, he looked decent standing and edged the stand-up and took the decision. And he's going up against another guy who really is his best fundamental is his jiu-jitsu. He's won multiple tournaments with his grappling previously. When you look at his UFC career, a lot of his wins come by submission, in particular that rear naked choke. That's such a dangerous tool that he utilises. He can scramble and take you back really quickly and really easily if you're not careful and you don't defend it well. he for me, his stand-up game is better than Cesar Ferreira, so I think he will be more even on the feet between Shoeface and Heinisch. He can get a bit wild on the feet sometimes, and yeah, I just think from the matchmaking perspective, they've put together a really good fight here, and we both talked in the Heinisch Tom Breeze breakdown how high we are on Heinisch and how we think he's got a high ceiling. He's a good, well-rounded fighter. He's although he got taken down 4 times, like I mentioned in the Ferreira fight, his takedown defense was decent. He managed to reverse position on the fence. He managed to take Ferreira down. He looked solid. His grappling fundamentals were solid when he got taken down, and he managed to get back to his feet. And then his boxing was crisp when they were standing and striking. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he fares against Shoeface and what game plan Shoeface comes into this one with, because I'm sure he will want to utilise his grappling. I'm sure he will want to get the fight to the mat and try and work for the submissions. I mean, we've seen it before with the like I mentioned with the Tim Bosch fight, and then Jack Marshman, Eric Spicely. He's got that hat trick of rear naked chokes in his last 3 fights. Before that, he went to a decision with Vittorian, and he got another rear naked choke in the fight prior to that. And when you look at his losses, he's only 2 losses to that knockout against Dan Kelly, and a loss to Patrick Cummins back in 2014, who's a really strong, heavy wrestler himself with heavy top pressure, and I don't think that Heinisch he's going to have he has got decent offensive wrestling. Like I say, he took down Ferreira, but I don't think he has got that kind of heavy wrestling that Pat Cummins has, and enough to test Shoeface with his wrestling, be able to hold him down, and I don't think you really want to be going into the guard very often of Shoeface anyway. So yeah, for me, I am going to go with Shoeface to win this fight. I think, like I said, the striking is pretty even. I think Heinisch is probably the more technical. Shoeface is a bit more aggressive, a bit more wild. Something that he did utilise very well in the Tim Bosch fight was that jab, and then that when Bosch returned fire, that step back 1-2 again, he utilised that a couple of times, as well as the low leg kicks, and he was pushing Bosch backwards, which is not Tim Bosch's game. He likes to come forward, he likes the pressure, and when he couldn't do that, because of Shoeface's game plan, he really struggled. And then as soon as he had that opportunity to take the fight to the mat, he did. He'll catch kicks and try and get trips off the catch kicks and stuff. So any opportunity he has, he tries to take this fight to the mat. And ultimately, I do think he will be able to get the fight to the ground. Like I said at the very start of this breakdown, I think it's going to be a really close fight, and I think it is going to play out very similarly to the Ferreira fight. I think Shoeface will get takedowns. I think Heinisch will get back to his feet, because he was scrambling well against Ferreira. I think he will get back to his feet, and then he'll play out on the feet for a couple of minutes. Heinisch will look good on the feet, and then Shoeface will take him down again, or just try and grapple him, wrestle him against the fence. And yeah, I think it's going to be a real back and forth, and those kind of fights can go either way in the judges' eyes, because it's all dependent on how they score it. Do they favour the wrestling and the submission attempts over the slight edge in the stand-up? And it's hard to tell, but I am going with Shoeface to win this fight. I think he will just do slightly more than Heinisch, and I think especially with regards to when the fight gets to the mat, Heinisch only lost of his career has come by submission. I don't think he'll get submitted in this fight, because we saw his submission defense against Cesar Ferreira, but yeah, I think it's going to be close, but I think Shoeface is going to edge it. I think he's just with those takedowns and that grappling offense and that constantly searching for submissions. I think he may be able to take the back of Heinisch at some point and try and work that rear naked choke, which obviously looks really good in the judges' eyes. And I just think all these things will just tally up, and he will take a very, very close decision, I believe. So I'm going with Shoeface to win this via decision.
Yeah, this is going to sound strange from me. I think this is a great fight, but I also think it's a fight that's not going to be that close. that might come as a surprise to some people as well, because a lot of people I've seen have played Ian Heinisch, played the big plus money line on him. But I think Shoeface is just a completely different animal, man. He's a problem for everybody in the division. He's huge for the division, 6'2", and he's built as well. He's not exactly like a tall lanky fighter. He's tall and he's muscular. He's thick, and like I say, he's got a lot of advantages of a lot of opponents in this division. He's an ex-heavyweight, so obviously that's where he gets his size from. In regards to what we get from Shoeface, we know his BJJ credentials are absolutely legit. He's a 2-time world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 2 times bronze medalist in the Jiu-Jitsu World Championships as well. He got a gold medal in the Pan American Championships in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu also, bronze medal in the World Cup in Abu Dhabi in BJJ. So the man's got all the good credentials when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's so deadly on the mat. Now, with Heinisch, in regards to his jiu-jitsu, I actually think he's got underrated jiu-jitsu, specifically defensively as well. So yes, he attacks and stuff like that. We saw him trying to attack an armbar from bottom against Cesar Mutanch, which was pretty impressive. The fact that he even tried that, and he wasn't too far off from completing it either. But defensively, we saw moments in that Mutanch fight where, if that was anybody else on the bottom of Mutanch, they would have been in real danger, and he probably would have got him out of there. So that speaks volumes for how good his defensive work in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is. But man, Shoeface is just a way more deadly beast on the mat than what Cesar Mutanch is. Yes, Cesar Mutanch is a 3rd degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm not sure about his tournament experience. He doesn't appear to have competed too much, especially not the level that Shoeface has competed at anyway. But the 3rd degree black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, I think that's, again, I'm not like trying to discredit that one little bit, but that's more of a time thing, with his age and how long he's been doing it, whereas Shoeface has just been actively competing in submission grappling, and I think we're gonna see that difference inside the cage, because I'm quite confident if Shoeface gets on top of Heinisch the way Mutanch got on top of Heinisch, then he will get him out of there, whether it be ground and pound, whether it be tiring him out and draining him for 3 rounds, or whether it be that submission. I honestly think Shoeface is one of the best grapplers in the middleweight division. He's, like I say, he's just a different animal. In regards to his striking was very raw when he first came into the UFC. He clearly needed improvement in that area, and we've seen it. It's very slow, but fight after fight, he's starting to look better and better with his hands and with his movement and with his speed, and putting it together, enabling him to move forward and close the distance ultimately, because regardless of how good his striking gets, his ultimate goal will always be to close distance and drag his fighter to the mat, especially at middleweight, with him being such an imposing figure and him being such a good grappler. So he's slowly improving, and we really saw that against Tim Boesch. Now, I know Tim Boesch isn't like some world beater with his hands and with his boxing, but the way that Shoeface just controlled that fight moving forward, he also ate some huge bombs off Boesch, and you can say what you want about Boesch, but normally when a big overhand of his fist connects to somebody else's chin, they go to sleep. So he had a few bombs, and even one of the bombs, it hit Shoeface, and he was just like, right, come on then, let's go. And I was like, holy shit, the dude's learned how to strike. And like I say, he's just putting it all together. Now, I like Ian Heinisch. I think he's a decent fighter. He's definitely going to stack up a lot of wins in the UFC. He's definitely going to be a fan favourite. I've also spoke to dude. I've interviewed him before as well. It was before the potential Breeze fight, and he's a really nice guy as well. But in regards to a style versus style, I just feel that Shoeface is just going to have pretty much all the advantages. It's not as if like he slows down or he gasses or anything like that either. I'm finding it hard to see how Heinisch does win this fight, aside from just landing a big shot on him and knocking Shoeface out. But like you say, you go back to the Boesch fight and you watch Boesch crack him, and he's got, Shoeface has proved he's got a chin on him, and he don't mind going toe to toe to close the distance. Like I say, I don't see Heinisch offensively wrestling him either. That's another thing as well. He's a 2-time state champion. I just from what I've seen from his wrestling, especially defensively as well, I just expected a little bit more. I don't know whether he just wasn't competing to his full potential against Cesar Mutanch, but he shouldn't have been taken down that many times with the wrestling credentials that he's got. So I do feel that he can be taken down. I do feel that he can be matched in the striking, and I feel that if the fight hits the mat, which I think it's going to, Heinisch is just outgunned on the mat. So I'm going to take Shoeface to win, and I think he's going to submit him. So yeah, I've got Antonio Carlos Jr. to win, and I've got him to win via submission. Now, in the last Showtime fight, we've got Charles Dobronx Oliveira versus Nick the Carney Lentz. John, who have you got?
This for me is a strange rematch to make at the time. Obviously, they fought back in 2015. They put on a really exciting fight. I think it was fight of the night, if I remember correctly, with Oliveira getting the win in that via submission, surprisingly. But yeah, I found it quite odd at the time when they announced this fight. I feel like their careers are kind of in different places. I know Nick Lentz is coming into the fight off back-to-back wins over Gray Maynard and Scott Holtzman. I picked Holtzman in that fight to beat Lentz. I thought Lentz was on the decline. I still think he is. Gray Maynard, Gray Maynard should hang up the gloves now. I mean, I don't really read too much into that victory over Gray Maynard, but Oliveira's, to me, continues to get better. I mean, he's only 29 years of age. He's won 4 on the bounce now. Clay Guida, Christos Giagos, Jim Miller, and most recently David Taymor, and he looks really good in that fight against David Taymor as well, which was back in February of this year. I mean, in the first round, he was very dangerous on the feet. I think Taymor's eye pokes had really wound him up into a frenzy, and he was just hunting Taymor down. He was just marching him down, utilising his Muay Thai, hitting him with kicks, elbows, and it was an eventual elbow that led to the finishing sequence early in the second round. He landed that big elbow, which caused Taymor to curl up against the fence, literally with his back to Oliveira, and Oliveira landed some heavy shots before taking it to the mat and wrapping up the anaconda. And this is going to be a pretty short breakdown for me, because I just think this fight is going to go the same way that Oliveira's last few fights have gone, and the same way that the first fight between the two went. I think Lentz, we know what he relies on. He's heavy wrestling. He utilised that against Holtzman well. He just kind of ground out that unanimous decision. He was holding Holtzman against the fence for long periods of the fight. Come round 3, they both looked absolutely exhausted. They're both really sloppy strikes on the feet because of how tired the two of them were, and I just think I don't really see how Lentz is going to win this fight, because Dobronx has got so many different ways in which he can win. He's as I mentioned, he's got strong elbows, knees with his Muay Thai. He kicks hard. He's got heavy hands. If Nick Lentz wants to wrestle and take him to the mat, I mean, we've seen how many submissions Oliveira's got via multiple methods. He's got that guillotine choke as well. So when Lentz is trying to work for a takedown, he's got guillotine choke wins over Clay Guida, Miles Jury, Nick Lentz in the first fight. I mean, I just don't see how Nick Lentz is going to win this fight. The only way in which it can happen, I think, is if Lentz just wears on Oliveira on the fence. If you can just literally pin him against the fence, not really work for a takedown, just do enough to ensure that the referee doesn't separate them, but doesn't risk it by actually taking it to the mat and be left in a dangerous position. I know Oliveira's offensive submissions when he's on top, he's better than his defensive wrestling, in my opinion, off his back. I mean, he gets a lot of his submissions after he's rocked an opponent or he's on top and he takes the back or anything like that. But I mean, he's still a guy that you don't want to go down to the mat with, and you don't want to be in their guard at all. So I just don't see what game plan Nick Lentz can utilise to try and win this. I mean, Oliveira, like I say, on the feet, he's getting a lot better. He cuts angles nicely now. He mixes up his different weapons. He can be flashing, he can be wild, he can be technical. I mean, he's a really good fighter. He's a really dangerous guy to fight. And like I said, I don't really understand from the last fight where I said I like the matchmaking from the UFC. On this behalf, I don't think this was the right match to make. I think, no offense to Nick Lentz, but I think Oliveira should have had someone higher up in the rankings in this fight. But yeah, I think Oliveira's going to get another win. I think he's going to finish it in the second round again. I think it's going to be by the usual method of submission. I think he's going to hurt Nick Lentz on the feet, whether it be a knee or an elbow when Lentz is trying to wrestle, or whether it just be through strike standing, just in like a boxing exchange or anything like that. But yeah, I think that Oliveira will hurt him, and I think the fight will go to the mat, and he tends to favour not finishing you with the ground and pound, but just trying to rip off one of your limbs instead. So yeah, I'm going with Charles Oliveira to win this fight. I think he's going to win quite comfortably via submission in the second round.
So, who wants some MMA math? Nick Lentz lost to David Taymor. Charles Do Bronx Oliveira beat David Taymor. Charles Oliveira also beat Nick Lentz in the past, so that means surely Charles Oliveira wins the fight, right? I'm only joking, but listen, I'm going to start with the losses here because I'm an optimistic type of guy. So we'll start with Nick Lentz. We've got David Taymor, Islam Makhachev, Charles Oliveira, Chad Mendes. Okay, that seems to be, enough recent losses for Nick Lentz. Then from Charles Oliveira's perspective, Paul Felder, Ricardo Lamas, Anthony Pettis, Max Holloway, Frankie Edgar, Prime Cub Swanson. So, man, these guys tend to only lose to good guys. I genuinely think this is going to be another good fight. And, Nick Lentz proved me wrong a little bit in his last fight because, I was massively high on Holtzman. I think I max bet Holtzman as well in that fight. So, that was a tough fight for me to watch. But credit to Nick Lentz, he did what he needed to do rounds 1 and 2, and there was a few people screaming a potential robbery or the fight should have gone the other way, and I actually disagree. I think Lentz won pretty comfortably in the end. But yeah, he did what he needed to do in rounds 1 and 2, and he did gas and sort of hung on in that round 3, survived, and yeah, he got the unanimous decision against a Scott Holtzman who was on a lot of form, and I thought a bad stylistic fight for him. And yeah, like I say, I do think that there's a little bit of decline in Lentz. I said that before the Holtzman fight. I also said that he wasn't totally done or close to being done, but I sense a little bit of decline. I still believe that, and I still believe that his best days are behind him. Whereas Charles Oliveira, man, he was a little bit inconsistent not so long back, lost against Holloway. We are going back 4 years at this point. Beat Miles Jury. Then he lost to Pettis, back-to-back Pettis loss with Lamas. Then he beat Will Brooks. Then he lost to Paul Felder. And you're sort of thinking, well, with him bouncing around divisions as well, sort of what's going on with Charles Oliveira? He came into the UFC, this massively hyped prospect, this kid that everyone was saying was going to be a superstar, and he was winning fights at a lower level, and then he started getting beat by the better competition, which you do expect from these prospects. And then, like I said, he started bouncing around divisions, missing weight and having to move up and coming back down. And whilst he's in the middle of all this, he's taking losses, then he's getting a win, then he's getting a loss. And it's like I say, you were sort of thinking, well, what is Do Bronx Oliveira all about at this point? But then since then, he beat Clay Guida, he beat Christos Giagos, he beat Jim Miller, he beat David Taymor, and those 4 wins are actually really, really good wins. And now he's 4 wins on the bounce, and he's looking like I know he wants to go back down to featherweight, but he's looking like a fighter that is extremely good at the weight above, even though he doesn't hit the the £155 limit. He normally weighs in a couple of pounds under, and he looks like he's finally found his feet. He's finally found his weight class. He won't gas at this weight either. He's always a couple of pounds, like I've just mentioned, under the limit, and it doesn't seem like he cuts a great deal of weight either. So he's got a solid 3 rounds in him. If he ever makes it to a title fight or to a main event, I think he's got a solid 5 in him as well there. So his striking's looking improved. We know his grappling's is legit, and always has been legit. We don't need to go too much into that, but like I say, his striking's looking great. He fought a lifelong Muay Thai kickboxer in David Tamor in his last fight, and was piecing him up. Like you say, he just looks like a different guy out there. Could have been, again, like you mentioned with the eye pokes, it could have pissed him off a little bit, and he just turned it up. But the fact that he could turn it up and look that great against someone that spent a lifetime in striking, it's impressive, man. It is really, really impressive. And I'm not under any illusions in this fight. Do Bronx is better on the feet. Do Bronx is better on the mat. There was questions sort of like 5-6 fights ago about Do Bronx's mentality, and the fact that we thought he may have been quitting in fights, and where he could have given a little bit more. It looked like he was looking for a way out, those sort of things. But man, that's eradicated from his game. He's been put in danger in these win streaks, and racking up the 4 wins he's been through adversity in some of the fights. I totally believe that that's gone out of his game, and like I say, he's improved his striking, and he's now looking like a really good mixed martial artist, and it's really great to see. I think that he's sort of in his peak right now, Charles Oliveira. He's got momentum. He's got the form behind him. He's got a real aggressive streak in him right now. And yeah, I agree with you, John. I struggle to see where Nick Lentz wins this fight. If he tries... Well, in fact, I think his path to victory is doing what he did to Holtzman minus the takedowns. I think he's got to pin him up against the cage. I think he's got to grind him. I think the referee will split him up because there's not enough action. And I think he has to go back to it as well. I know it's ugly. I know it doesn't look good, the referee splitting him. But the bottom line is, in that scenario, one fighter has to be scoring points, and the fighter that's going to be scoring the points is the one that's making it ugly. So I think he has to do exactly what he did to Holtzman, just minus the takedowns, because if he goes to the mat with Oliveira, that's dangerous. He's already been guillotined by Oliveira, but a sweep, a transition, a back take in a scramble, you're risking all these types of things with Do Bronx. And if he stays standing, I think he's just going to get totally pieced up. I think he's the slower fighter. I think his movement isn't as quick as Do Bronx. I don't think he's as sharp. I don't think his volume's going to be as great as Do Bronx is. And, if Do Bronx is having success on his feet, he's not going to have to go to the ground. Like, he's not going to have to force that. So I can see multiple paths to victory for Do Bronx. I see one path to victory for Nick Lentz, but I feel that path to victory is quite small, and I don't think he's going to be able to pull it off. And ultimately, John, again, I agree with you exactly how this fight is going to finish. I think that Do Bronx is going to hurt him on the feet. I think he's going to jump on a back or a limb, and I think he's going to get Nick Lentz out of there. So I've got Charles Do Bronx Oliveira to win, and I'm going to take him to win via submission. And now we move on to the parlay piece. The first parlay piece of the card is in the Davi Ramos versus Austin Hubbard fight. Now, with this parlay, I've obviously had this triggered now to talk about the parlay for a good couple of days. Betting lines move, betting lines change, and unfortunately for both pieces of this parlay, the betting lines have increased quite significantly in both. But I do still feel two things. I still feel that if you're getting sort of anywhere between minus 200 and minus 225 on them both, obviously I'll reveal the second parlay piece very shortly, but if you're getting minus 200, minus 225 on both, I still feel that you've got value, because let's be honest, we still play fighters at that sort of price range anyway, singularly. So if you're getting two, in my opinion, very as close to a lock as you can possibly get in MMA, that at minus 200, minus 225, I still think there's value in that. However, if you don't feel comfortable playing the minus 200, minus 225 on both of these two fighters in a parlay together, use them for future cards. Take Davi Ramos, which, like I said, I'll explain in a minute. Take him, use him in a future card with a fighter that also looks like a good parlay piece too. Obviously, I can't recommend any right now because we haven't run that podcast. I haven't done that, that tape yet. So, and that's for a different time. But, you don't have to use them together. These parlay pieces, yes, they can work together. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about them right now on the podcast. But like I say, use them where you see fit. But yeah, Davi Ramos, Austin Hubbard. Davi Ramos is sort of, around the minus 450 line right now. I think it's going to only get worse as well. The dude is an absolute animal. He's striking, he's aggressive, powerful. And it also looks like he's getting a little better with it too as his career is moving forward. He's not so much of just a winging bomb guy and hoping for the best. He has started to put his striking together a little bit better, which is also reflecting well in his entries for takedowns, which is absolutely where he wants his fight because he is a beast grappler. As I mentioned with Shoeface earlier on, this is a guy that's competed at an even greater level than Shoeface. He's grappled some of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artists on the planet. The dude is an absolute machine on the mat. And when he gets on the mat, I'd be very surprised if he faces an opponent in this division that is going to have an advantage over him on the mat. He's just that good. Now, Austin Hubbard, obviously making his debut in the UFC. A lot of people aren't going to know too much about this guy. From what I've seen running tape, the guy is predominantly a striker. He likes to strike, but he falls back on his wrestling if it gets a little bit tough, if he gets rocked, or if he feels that he's not making the right reads on the feet and is really struggling to get his striking going. The wrestling is where he falls back to. So this is where I think Davi Ramos is going to have a huge advantage in this fight because he can't fall back on that wrestling. The last thing that Austin Hubbard wants to do on his UFC debut is try and double leg Davi Ramos, you know what I mean? You're going to end up in a bit of a pickle. So the fallback, the plan B of Austin Hubbard isn't there. Now, this can really throw fighters because a lot of fighters are like this. They have a plan A and they have a plan B, a fallback plan. But when one of those, when plan A or plan B can't work, specifically plan B, the fallback plan, it tends to really throw fighters, and especially the last thing that you need in this situation is to be making your UFC debut under the brightest lights against a dude that's an absolute phenom in your plan B. So I think it's a very tall ask for Austin Hubbard. I think he's ultimately either got to wear Davi Ramos out and steal one of the early rounds and the third round win a decision, or he's just got to land the puncher's chance and knock him out. And unfortunately, I just don't think those paths to victories are something that's going to actually play out in this fight because, like I've already mentioned, Davi Ramos is just such a phenom and a fighter that's just getting better and better as well. This fight actually really reminds me of Gilbert Burns versus Davis a couple of weeks ago. In the respect that I said the same things about Davis as what I'm about to say about Hubbard. I think that they will win fights in the UFC, and I think they will perform well in the UFC. And there's a 100% a place for both of those guys. However, their debut is just against a fighter that is on a completely different level, and it's going to be very difficult for him to win. I actually thought Davis could have been pretty live against Gilbert Burns, but like I said, there's levels to this game in MMA, and Burns just proved he was a level above, and I feel we're going to see the same here. I do think the fight is going to end. It could end relatively quickly. I actually feel that we're going to see a similar sort of fight to what we saw with Davi Ramos and Nick Hein. In tape, I've seen Austin Hubbard be a bit timid on the feet. I've seen him getting taken down. I've seen him get his back taken relatively quickly with not too much resistance from said takedown. All these things aren't stacking up for him. So for me, the first part of the parlay piece for this podcast is Davi Ramos. I think he really shows that there's levels in MMA. I think he takes Hubbard down. I think he submits him and gets him out of there. So I've got Davi Ramos to win, and I've got him to win via submission. John, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I think it's going to be a baptism of fire for Austin Hubbard when he goes in there against Davi Ramos. I mean, it's a really tough fight to make your to come into for your UFC debut. as you mentioned, just echo a couple of things that you said about Hubbard that I noticed from the tape. Yeah, he's predominantly a striker, but does like to utilise his wrestling where he can and if he needs to. But yeah, he's not going to be able to do this against Ramos because Ramos is an absolute beast on the mat. I didn't really see anything from Hubbard, the tape that I watched, to say that he has got the ability to piece Ramos up on the feet and just try to stuff takedowns and keep it standing, and he'll have a clear advantage there. I didn't see anything of the sort, so it's not like I can even argue that he has a clear path to victory by keeping his standing and dominating on the feet, because like you say, Ramos' striking is getting a lot better, especially he's striking to lead to those takedown entries, and Hubbard's striking just looked solid, nothing more than that from what I've seen in the tape. But yeah, as you said, Ramos, when he gets the fight to the ground, he can take you back with ease. He can lock on submissions quickly if you submission defense isn't up to scratch, and we've seen that in his last two fights as well. He does only need one takedown in order to win the fight. His last fight against John Gunther, he got the takedown after about 10 seconds, and he stayed on top until he found the back and got the rear naked choke. Nick Hein, he took Nick Hein down once, and he worked his way to back to get the rear naked choke. So he's not like he's one of these guys who will take you down, and it takes him several attempts to several takedowns to eventually get this submission, or guys tend to really fight off the submissions and see out the round, and then make it through to the next round, etc., etc. He once he gets you down, he can finish it very, very quickly. And we actually said before the Ramos and John Gunther fight on the podcast, what has Gunther done to upset the UFC top brass, because that was a horrible fight for them to make for him. Because a lot of people were questioning his skills going into the fight anyway, and to go up against the beast like Ramos, who just showed like you say, the complete levels to this sport. And I think it's going to be another similar tale with Hubbard. I think that Ramos there may be a couple of minutes feeling out process, but Ramos will want to get this fight to the mat quickly, and where he has plenty of time to utilise his submission game, and I think that's what he'll do. I think he'll do it to a T. I think we'll see another hat trick of rear naked chokes as well. As you said, Hubbard has given up his back in some of the fights that I watched, although he did manage to fend off some of the choke attempts then against Davi Ramos. He's going up against a completely different beast. So yeah, I think maybe a minute and a half into the round, Ramos will take this fight to the mat. I don't think he'll have massive difficulties in doing so either, and then it gives him plenty of time, 3.5 minutes to work his submission game, and I do think he will be able to get a submission, and I do think he'll get it in the first round as well. So yeah, I'm going with Davi Ramos to win this fight via submission in round one.
Awesome. And in the next parlay piece, we've got Julio Arce versus Julian Erosa. Now, just looking at the lines now, Arce is being absolutely steamed. You know, he sort of came in at minus 350, minus 400. You can still get him at minus 500 in some places, but now one of the books has just dropped him at like minus 700. He's minus 650 in other places, so he's quite scattered. His line, so it's ultimately just finding or just making sure that you go into the places where you can hit sort of the minus 500s and the minus 550s. I really would draw the line at minus 700, to be honest. But it's a huge mismatch. The fight is an absolute mismatch, and I just do not see where Julian Erosa wins this fight. He's absolutely going to have no answer for Arce in his striking. Arce is a phenomenal striker, Golden Gloves winner, if I remember correctly, and the guy just puts combinations together really, really well. And to go with that, he's also got a very underrated ground game as well. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is good. He doesn't seem to put himself in too much bother on the mat. And Julian Erosa is a fighter that I think he's okay, but he's just not. He's like I keep mentioning tonight about levels in MMA, and I just don't feel that he's anywhere close to Julio Arce, and I understand why the betting line is so wide on this fight for sure. And you look at Arce's record; he's only winning in. In how many fights is Shaman Marias? Sorry, he's only lost is Shaman Marias, and that's not a bad loss by any stretch of the imagination. That dude is as legit as they come, and it shouldn't have been a split decision. I thought Shaman unanimously won that fight, but it was a fight that Arce is no Shaman, and it showed a lot about Arce for his character, because he had a setback. But he didn't let it affect him. He's come straight back into the cage. He also got beat up pretty bad in regards to cuts and blood. Like, it was an absolute bloodbath in that fight. So he's faced adversity. He didn't look for a way out. He didn't look for to quit in the fight. Showed no signs of anything like of that sort. So you can almost trust him to give everything and inside the cage for you, and ultimately just fight for your money, which is what we want out of these fighters when we're betting them. So I think Arce is going to put combinations together. I think Julian Erosa is going to be a step behind at all times if he tries taking Arce down. I'm not sure if he'll be successful, but if he is successful in the takedown, there's going to be scrambles in there. I think Arce is a good scrambler as well. He could easily end up on top and reverse position in a scramble. But, that's, like I said, that's if Julian Erosa is really, does get his entries really timed and shoots in a good double or single. And, the other option is, does he push him against the cage and try and work against the cage? But Arce's got nasty elbows, and he's also got a sneaky back take against the cage as well. So if Erosa is pushing him there, it wouldn't surprise me if he just found a little exit and just sneaked out, angled, took the back, and jumped the back, similar to what he did against Shaman Marias. And like I say, I just feel that wherever this fight goes, Arce is going to have not just an advantage, but a pretty sizable advantage as well. I'd be very, very shocked if Julian Erosa was the upset of the night, put it that way. I think Arce is going to finish him. I've got a feeling it's going to be a submission as well. I feel that the fight's going to hit the mat at some point. Could potentially be late if Erosa's a little bit worn out like he was against Grant Dawson. So I do think that Arce is going to finish the fight. I do think if he does, it's going to be late though, and like I say, it's going to be when Erosa's a little bit tired, in my opinion, accumulation of strikes, or like I say, just hopping her back and sinking a rear naked choking. Ultimately, like I've said, I'm going to go for the submission. I think Julio Arce is going to win this fight. I think he's going to win via submission. So the parlay piece in total is Davi Ramos and Julio Arce. Like I've said, if you're not comfortable with the minus 200, minus 225, or if it's even worse for you, you can try and use these guys in future cards. The bookies are really good at the minute. They've got lines out for numerous fight cards coming up. Stockholm, UFC 238. So there's plenty of opportunities to try and mix these guys in with something potentially that you really like in a future card. So yeah, the two parlay pieces are there. John, Julio Arce, Julian Erosa. What are your thoughts?
As I just mentioned in the last fight with John Gunther, I don't know what he'd done to upset the UFC. I also don't know what Julian Erosa has done to upset the UFC as well, because obviously this is his second shot in the UFC, having competed on the Ultimate Fighter season 22 previously. He got released going 1-1 in the UFC proper. He went on a good run of fights. He worked his way back into the UFC, and then he was given Devontae Smith, who obliterated him in 45 seconds of the first round. Grant Dawson, who just spoke about, got the decision win in the last fight, and then a guy who you definitely do not want to be facing when you're coming into a fight. Probably you know that this is it for your UFC career, full stop. I don't think you're coming back to the UFC if you lose this fight. Even if you go away and win 10 fights in a row, I'm not sure they'll give you a third shot, or it's very unlikely anyway. And the last guy that you want to be told that you matched up against is Julio Arce, because he's an absolute beast. And when you look, and his only loss is that last fight Sorry, he's only lost in the last 3 years is against Shayman Moraes. Then yeah, it's you know that you've got an impressive contender in there. I mean, he's beat Daniel Tamor via rear naked choke, Dan Ige, who we know he's surging at the moment. He also got the win in Dana White's Contender Series. He's a very well-rounded fighter. He's got it standing up. He's got cardio. We saw in the Tamor fight when they came out for, before they'd even come out for round 3, Tamor was breathing heavy on the stool, trying to get every last gasp of air into his lungs before they started the last 5 minutes. And Arce was off his stool with 25 seconds left before the start of the third round. He was jumping around, pacing around, just waiting for the round to start. Man, he's got cardio, like you say. He's a good boxer, and he's got good submission skills. He can take the back from standing positions. We saw that early on in the Shayman Moraes fight. He took the back against the fence, and he's just an all-round very, very dangerous guy who can win fights anywhere. If he needs to eke out decisions, he can. If he wants to take you down and submit you, he can. If he wants to beat you up on the feet, he can. I just don't see a way that Erosa is going to win this fight, because he got starched when he was striking with Devontae Smith. He got out wrestled by the UFC newcomer Grant Dawson in their fight, and like you say, when it got to round 3, albeit Dawson was exhausted as well, but Juicy J was out on his feet. His cardio was shot, and as I just mentioned with Arce in the Tamor fight, he looked like he could have gone another 3 or 4 rounds against Tamor when he came out for that third round. So I just don't see how he's going to win this fight. I don't think he'll be able to pressure Arce against the fence. I don't think he'll be able to take him down, and I don't think he'll be able to compete with him standing. So I think Arce is going to comprehensively win this fight. I think he's going to finish Erosa. I think it'll be the second round. It wouldn't surprise me if his striking led to a ground and pound finish, or possibly a submission if he jumps on again like a rear naked choke or anything like that when he's got Erosa hurt. But yeah, I think Arce is going to put him away in round 2 of this fight.
Awesome, and now it's time for the dog fight. And we believe the best underdog on the card is in the Mike Trizano and Grant Dawson fight. So, you've just mentioned Grant Dawson there, John, in his last fight. Yep. And yeah, man, with Michael Trizano unbeaten 8-0, I was just having a little giggle to myself there, because one of his previous opponents is called James Gonzalez, and I noticed that his nickname was Speedy Gonzalez. Made me chuckle a little bit. I hope some people, most people should get that reference, I'm sure. But yeah, Trizano, man, he's a fighter that is decent all round, but there's something about the dude I'm not massively high on him. I think that, like I say, he's got well-rounded skills in every area, but he doesn't thrive in a particular discipline in MMA. And I feel that these sort of fighters can only go so far, because you need to be a specialist in something. I feel when you're starting to touch upon the top of the division and you're starting to fight some real world-class opponents. Now, Grant Dawson isn't the top of the division, and he's not yet world-class, but what he does have is a specialty, and I think this is going to be the difference in this fight. So for those that haven't seen the line, by the way, Grant Dawson's the underdog. He's sort of anywhere between plus 115, plus 120. And I think there's real tremendous value on that line. Now, Grant Dawson, we saw in his last fight, before we go into his last fight, before that fight, I had a lot of questions about the dude. His striking didn't look that great. I wondered how it would fare in the UFC, especially if he couldn't get his wrestling going, because that's primarily his bread and butter. It's the wrestling, and he's got great entries and fucking awesome chain wrestling as well. Like, when one thing doesn't work, when the double doesn't work, he'll go to a single. When the single doesn't work, he'll look for underhooks, the body lock. When that doesn't work, he'll go back to a double. Honestly, it's beautiful to watch. If you love your wrestling, he'll just quickly chain between different potential takedowns until he finds something that works. He'll pick you up and then he'll slam you. So the dude, like I said, is a specialist in the wrestling, but I did have question marks before his debut that because he's striking, again, similar to what I mentioned with Shoeface earlier on, his striking needs work, and I wondered that if he couldn't get his wrestling going, would he really struggle? Now, he fought Julian Erosa on his debut. Now, I know we've just talked a little bit of shit on Julian Erosa, no disrespect, it's just that is a big mismatch with the Arce fight, but Julian Erosa is actually a real tough test for any debutant coming into the UFC because he's a veteran, and again, like Mike Trizano, he's got skills all round. He doesn't thrive in a particular area, but he's a decent striker, he's a decent wrestler, he's a decent grappler, but he's just not prolific in any of them areas. And I know that's shitty and easy for me to say sat on my couch. I'm just looking this from, comparing to other UFC athletes, not comparing to fucking me. So, yeah, I feel that Trizano holds similarities to Julian Erosa, but just a slightly better version. This is definitely a step up for Grant Dawson. But between fights, Grant Dawson's going to be working on this striking, and this striking is going to be slowly improving. I can almost guarantee that. Not that I think it matters too much in this fight, because now I've seen what he did against Julian Erosa, completely and totally committing to the wrestling. Even when it wasn't working on your debut with the UFC jitters, he still kept at it. He knew his game plan, he knew what he was good at, and he just kept at it until it worked. And when Erosa stood back up, he didn't get unmotivated, he didn't get demoralized, he just went straight back to it and just went back to the grind. And now I've seen that once, I can put my trust in him that that's what he's going to do. He knows where he's good, he knows where he wins the fights, and if it doesn't work, he won't get demoralized, he'll just keep coming back, and he'll keep coming back. And you know what, if he loses, he's given it everything that he's got. He can walk out of the cage and just think, fuck, my opponent was just better than me on the night, so I can put my trust in Grant Dawson in that respect right now. Now, here comes the other side to this story. So, Mike Trizano is moving down to 145 pounds for this fight. Now, he has fought there 3 times prior. I think the last time was 2 or 3 years ago. So, he has got experience moving down to featherweight. But to me, it's just a little bit interesting to why he was fighting at featherweight. Well, he started at lightweight, then he went to featherweight, and then he went back up to lightweight. And it's almost like, to me, did it really work for him? And this was obviously when he was a little bit younger. Obviously, as these athletes grow and get older, the bodies change, the bodies fill out a little more, and the weight cutting gets harder and harder the older you get. And obviously, Trizano isn't that old; he's only 27. But what I'm trying to say is, when he's gone from lightweight to featherweight to lightweight, that to me tells me that he was okay at lightweight and he thought he could do it at featherweight, but maybe it didn't work. He didn't feel as great at featherweight, so then he moved back up to lightweight, got into the UFC, and now he's trying it one last time. It almost adds a question mark for me for he's just hopped around too much for me, and I'm just wondering if he's giving it a second go after maybe a previously bad experience. But that's an assumption that and a guess that I'm making in this fight. It's obviously not a reason why I think that he's going to lose the fight. I think the reason he's going to lose the fight is because of Grant Dawson. I think Grant Dawson's wrestling, his relentless wrestling, his pressure, his chain wrestling, from, like I said, from one takedown to the next, and if it doesn't work, they pop back up, he'll take you straight back down again, and he's got decent cardio. He wings bombs to close the distance, so where his striking is improving, he's just making it work for his style right now. I will always like that fighter. I will always love that fighter that has the game plan to just go in there and take their opponent down repeatedly, and will do it 10 times if they have to. I always love that fighter. This is the reason why I think Grant Dawson's the best underdog on the card. Solid style, solid path to victory at plus 120, plus 115, fuck, even plus 110 or any plus money, I just feel that it's a good plus money play. I'm going Grant Dawson to win. I think it's going to be a grueling decision. I think Trizano could potentially tire with the weight cut further down the line. I trust Grant Dawson to stick to his game plan. I've got Grant Dawson to win this fight. I've got him to win by a decision. John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, as you alluded to at the very start of that breakdown with Mike Trizano, for me, there's nothing that really, there's nothing that's massively stood out in his game that he's like like you say, a particular strength I know mixed martial arts, it's nowadays you can't just be a fantastic grappler or nothing else, or you can't just be an excellent striker with no ground game, but you have to be very well rounded. But I feel like he's just an okay level of well rounded. I mean, he's not a really solid all rounded guy. I'm trying to think of someone off the top of my head, and as usual with
Arce
these things,
is a good example of that.
Yeah, Arce. Yeah, that's a perfect example. Yeah, he's a dangerous guy. He's a dangerous guy everywhere. Whereas I think Trizano's just an okay guy where he's got okay wrestling, he's got okay takedown defense, his striking's okay, his cardio's okay. I mean, there's nothing that really stands out, and it kind of. When you look through his record, when he's fought against the better opponents like Joe Giannetti, Luis Pena, obviously they're two guys off the Ultimate Fighter season 27 that he was on. He's edged them with very close split decisions. He got that decision win over John Gunther. I know we've just kind of talked a bit of shit on John Gunther as well, but he is a tough guy, but he's definitely a finishable guy, and obviously he took him to a decision, and yeah, I'm just not really sold on Mike Trizano at the moment, to be honest. And as you said, now he's going down a weight class, and that could be a bad thing against a guy like Grant Dawson because of the things that you've pointed out, the chain wrestling. He literally was non-stop grinding against Julian Erosa, just non-stop takedown events. He just walked forward. Sometimes it was pretty ugly. Yeah, sometimes he got caught with the counters, but you can tell that he's a guy who's 110% grit and heart and determination, mixed with a good solid skill as well, which is his wrestling, and guys who tend to have this style of grinding, wearing people down, relentless takedown attempts, they tend to do pretty well in the UFC, and they tend to get a lot of wins on their record. And we saw it in the Julian Erosa fight. I know I alluded to that briefly, but yeah, we really saw it in that fight. He took Erosa down, I think it was 6 times in that fight, and although Erosa got back to his feet and kept getting the fight back standing, he kept taking him down, and like you said, he didn't lose heart. He just kept marching forward, didn't give Erosa a second, and right until that very last bell, he was working for the takedown, chaining them together when the double didn't work, and yeah, he's going to win a lot of fights. And if he's like I said, both guys were really tired come round 3 in that fight, but if he can work on that cardio and maybe like iron out that technique, which will come. He's only 25 years old. He's training at a good gym as well, Glory MMA and Fitness, Zach Cummins and James Krause there. He will win fights in the UFC, and I definitely think this is a winnable fight. And obviously this is the underdog section. Which underdog we think stands the best chance of winning? And I definitely think it's Grant Dawson, because he's got a style that can cause a lot of people problems. He's tough. He's going up against a guy who I personally don't think has got real finishing power. Going down a weight class as well, I don't think will help that out, especially with his striking. I don't think it'll do wonders for his cardio. And yeah, Dawson's style can definitely cause Trizano problems. And for that reason, I definitely think Dawson can edge 2 out of these 3 rounds. As I briefly mentioned, Trizano's fights are usually pretty tight. They're close fights. He doesn't run away with the fights. He doesn't really stamp down his authority and really stand out in the judge's eyes with anything he does. And for that reason, you leave yourself very vulnerable to losing decisions. And against the guy who constantly is marching forward and constantly trying to take you down, unless you're really piecing them up on the feet and stuffing those takedowns with ease, then you could well be on the losing end of a decision, and that's how I think this fight is going to play out. I think Grant Dawson is going to win 2 rounds, and I think Mike Trizano may take 1 round, and it's going to be a very close fight. But I think Grant Dawson can eke this out with that relentless style of his. So yeah, I'm going with Grant Dawson to win this fight, and I'm going with him to win via decision.
And with the breakdowns complete, we now enter the quick fire round. And first up in the quick fire round is Megan Anderson versus Felicia Spencer. John, who have you got?
Yeah, interesting fight. Good to see Megan Anderson back in the UFC, competing again after obviously the I don't want to say the shambles, but the shambles that was the Katzingano fight. Going off on a slight tangent really quickly, I think that's a rule that I personally think they should look at changing, because that's a ridiculous way to win. I know it wasn't intentional. Obviously that big toe to the eye, and I know this is a physical, brutal, violent sport, but if you can't poke people in the eyes, your big toe like slicing across your eyeball, and we saw the damage it did to Katzingano. I think that also should be, if a fight finishes in that manner, I think it should be ruled a no contest. But as I say, that was going off on a tangent. I haven't seen a great deal of Felicia Spencer coming in from Invicta. I know she's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. We saw Anderson's weakness against Holly Holm was with that wrestling. But for me, I think Anderson takes this fight. She'll have learned a lot from the Holly Holm fight. I don't think she was expecting Holm to wrestle so much. She'll have prepared for the wrestling against Katzingano. I think she'll have further prepared for a wrestling and getting up off her back and things like that against for this fight against Spencer. I think striking, she can utilise her long limbs, and that's what I think she'll do. I think she'll outstrike Felicia Spencer, and I think she will get a decision victory. So I'm going with Megan Anderson to win by decision.
Yeah, man, I've got a funny feeling this fight's going to be pretty ugly. We've essentially got a striker in Anderson versus a grappler in Spencer. Now, the striker in Anderson got out-wrestled by a striker, a lifelong striker, boxer, kickboxer in Holly Holm. So that doesn't bode well, because Spencer is the type of fighter to close the distance, drag the fight to the mat and try and grapple you. However, when you go and look at Spencer, she makes so many mistakes in wrestling, completing takedowns, or, well, the failing to complete takedowns. You know, sort of going in, nice entry, she's got the takedown, but then just, like, it seems like she hits a brick wall and then falls to her back and lets her opponent on top. And it's not just once I've seen that. I've seen that numerous times. So huge red flags there. You've probably got to expect development from Anderson's side in the grappling after what happened against Holly Holm. It's a shame that we never got to see more of the Katzingano fight, because that fight would have told us so much about this fight. With the mistakes that I'm seeing Spencer make in the wrestling, I have to pick Anderson. I have to pick her to win. You know, my money would be absolutely nowhere near this fight. But if I'm picking a winner, which I have to for the sake of the podcast, I'm going Anderson to win. And I think she just stays on the outside. I think she'll defend some takedowns. She may even end up on top through one of the mistakes that Spencer makes, but ultimately I just see Anderson picking her apart from the outside. I've got Anderson to win, and I'm also going to take her to win via decision. Now, in the next fight, the next quick fire fight, we've got Aspen Lad versus Sijara Eubanks. John, who have you got?
I'm this one's going to be pretty quick from me, because I'm a big Aspen Lad fan. I think she's a very good fighter. I think she's got a very high ceiling for someone who's just 24 years of age. She shows great maturity in the octagon. She's brutal when the fight gets to the mat, and she's got very good wrestling, gets the fight to the ground, and then she literally screams as she pummels your face in on the on the ground. And that's shown in the last two fights against Lena Landsberg and Tonya Evinger, getting those two stoppages via ground and pound. Sijara Eubanks, of course, is coming up in weight from flyweight, having struggled there. Haven't been greatly impressed with her. I think obviously her bread and butter is her striking. But she's not really a finisher. Will she have better striking than Lad? Yeah, possibly. She may be more technical, slightly quicker. The two of them have fought before in Invicta back in 2017. Aspen Lad won that fight via decision. I think Lad has only got better since then. She's only 22 at the time, and I think she's only got better. I think this is going to be a tough one for Sijara Eubanks. I think Lad is going to take her down, and I think it's going to be more of the same from Aspen Lad. And just pummeling Sijara Eubanks until she gets the finish. So I'm going with Aspen Lad to win this fight via ground and pound strikes. I think it will go to a second round. I think the first round will be a bit more of a feeling out process against someone like Eubanks on the feet who'll be quite quick. But once Lad gets that timing down, I think she'll get it to the mat and she'll get it finished. So I'm going with Aspen Lad to win this fight in round two.
Yeah, these two women are really close in regards to the skills, and we saw that in the first fight that they had. You touched upon it, John. The fight that they had in Invicta. You know, they were both relatively well matched on the feet. They were both well matched on the wrestling and on the mat as well. And you know, Aspen lad is the one making improvements in my opinion. Striking a little bit, but a grappling and a top pressure and the ground and pound that she lands whilst on top. I do think that she sways a lot of the referees, by the way, looking up at him, you know, sort of in a peripheral vision, and then while screaming warrior cries and stuff down while she's raining ground and pound. I do think that will play some mental part in the the referee's mind for sure. But yeah, I think Aspen lad's been the one making improvements since the last fight. I do see them being quite well matched again, both on the feet and both on the ground. I don't think Aspen lad's gonna run over Sijara Eubanks on the mat like she did against Tonya Evinger and Lena Landsberg. So I do think she's gonna score the points over a 3-round decision though. So I'm going to have Aspen lad to win. I'm going to take her to win via decision. Now in the next quick fire fight, we've got Desmond Green versus Charles Jourdain. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm glad to see Des Green got the opportunity to fight in Rochester. He was calling for it after that fantastic victory over Ross Pearson, where he really showed what he's capable of. I know Ross Pearson, that was his last fight in mixed martial arts before he retired. But yeah, it's been a bit of a tough start for Des Green since coming into the UFC in 2017. He's now 3-3, but he's come up against some tough guys: Taisimov, Pereira, and Rustam Habilov. So it's been a tough start for him, but. Yeah, he gets to fight in front of some hometown fans against Charles Jourdain, a guy making his UFC debut. He's been fighting on the TKO promotion for almost the entirety of his professional career. He's a good striker. He can put you away. His last fight was a 5th-round finish over Damian Lapulus, who we know is he's a decent standard of fighter. And when you look at the guys he's fought, they have got winning records. That's something we always talk about when we look at these newcomers. But and at 23 years of age as well, I mean, he's got time on his side to really go places. But for me, I just think Des Green's going to be too experienced in this fight. I think he'll be able to utilise his wrestling well to nullify Jourdain. And I think it's going to be another fight to go to a decision for Des Green, as we know that before the Ross Pearson fight, pretty much all his fights went to a decision. But yeah, I think Des Green is going to be the more experienced fighter. I think he'll utilise that strong wrestling base that he has to nullify Jourdain on the feet and get the decision win. So I'm going with Des Green to win this fight by decision.
Yeah, Charles Jourdain's a good addition to the UFC. He's a flashy striker, quite technical as well. He's got great movement, really opportunistic on the feet. He is a little deficient in the wrestling, which I think is what's going to play a part in this fight mostly. But he has nice submissions himself as well. You know, he is quite well rounded. It's just when we are talking deficiencies, because every fighter that isn't called a Habib Nurmagomedov has a deficiency in MMA. You know. I think Des Green's going to have trouble early against Jourdain. I think Jourdain, if he comes in and he's confident, I know obviously it's his UFC debut, the octagon jitters might be present, but if he comes in and he's confident and he's loose and he starts, you know, throwing his strikes about, the one thing that we always say about Des Green is he fights to his opponent's level. You know, I'm not saying that Jourdain's a bad level, but what I'm saying is pretty much every fight, apart from the Ross Pearson fight that he fought in last, is always relatively close. And I think for at least the first round, I think Des Green might be a little bit bamboozled with the movement and the footwork and the striking of Jourdain, but ultimately I think he will make those reads. I think he will end up taking over the fight. I think he can get his wrestling going, and I do see him edging out another decision. So I've got Des Green to win, and I am going to take him to win via decision. Now, in the next fight, we've got Danny Roberts versus the newcomer, Michel Pereira. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this fight for me is potential fight of the night candidate, because Danny Roberts is crazy. He'll get involved in some violent wars, and Michel Pereira as well is another guy that that's wild. I mean, the clip went round from his last fight when he's fighting for Road FC back in February of him doing a backflip off the cage onto his opponent on his way to victory. He's just a bit of a madman in there, and he comes out with a heavy pressure, aggressive striking. He can knock you out. He can finish the fight off the mat. He's got some really good scrambles on the mat as well. Danny Roberts isn't afraid to throw down with anybody. That Mike Perry fight back at UFC 204 was violent. He's got knockout power. We've seen that against Bobby Nash on Oliver Enkamp, but he can also be on the losing end of those scrambles or those slugfests as we saw against Perry, Taleb, and Claudio Silva more recently, when that mistake cost him in with that armbar loss, which he wasn't too happy with at the time. But looking back, well, to be fair, looking back, it's still not very clear whether it should have been called, because it was like a verbal yelp of pain that caused the referee to jump in and stop that. But that was a really fun fight, full of scrambles and opportunities and to finish for both guys. And I mean, this is a really hard one to call, because who'd you pick when you just have the opinion that two guys are going to stand there, look at each other, and just throw down until one of them drops? Ultimately, I'm going to go with hot chocolate. I'm going to go Danny Roberts to win this fight. Pereira's game leaves him, his wild style leaves him vulnerable to counter shots. To be fair, Danny Roberts does as well, but I just think Danny Roberts, with his experience he has in the UFC, he's seen most things now. He's come up against tough, wild guys like the Mike Perrys. He's come up against more technical guys. He's come up against submission specialists, and I just think that Danny Roberts will just edge this fight with his striking. Like I say, it's going to be a war, but and I do think someone is going to get finished in this fight. But yeah, I'm going with Danny Roberts to land a heavy counter shot and put Michel Pereira as well. So I'm going with Danny Roberts to win via finish.
Yeah, let's not sit here and pretend that Pereira isn't fucking crazy. Like, the dude's absolute nuts. And you know what? Before I break this fight down, I just want to pay a little bit of respect to the UFC for this, because they will have seen that fucking moonsault clip where he's backflipped off the cage into the guard of his opponent, and I can only imagine Dana White just sitting there watching that happen and with his mouth wide open, jaw to the floor, just like, holy shit, and then just picking the phone up and just calling Sean Shelby and just saying, sign him. like credit to the UFC, because they've got him in based on the highlights that they've seen. They just wanted a fucking wild madman inside the cage, and they've got the man. And this is actually a really good fight, because Danny Roberts is absolutely going to have to weather a storm. The problem is, with all the energy that Pereira exerts inside the cage, you know, when we are talking seriously now, it's for his cardio, it doesn't wane so well for him, and I do see a bit of fatigue later on in his fights, and I feel that Danny Roberts is definitely going to have to, like I've already mentioned, weather a storm in this fight. And if I was Danny Roberts, I would stay safe, drop round one if you need to. Just fucking drop round one, because after round one, I think the power's going to come out of his hands, the sting won't be there, the crazy flashy shit possibly won't be there as much, and if it is, you'll be able to telegraph it very easily and just be able to see it coming, and then from there, fundamentals will beat flash most of the time. So that's where I see the fight. I think we've got a crazy madman who's going to be great to watch, that could probably go on a 10-fight losing streak, and the UFC would still probably keep him keep him on the roster. But he's coming against a guy that's a UFC vet, and he's got solid fundamentals, and I will always pick the UFC vet that's got solid fundamentals over the flashy guy. I've got Danny Roberts to win, and I think he's going to win via decision. Now, in the next quick-fire fight, we've got Patrick Durkin Cummins versus Ed Herman. John, who have you got?
Just quickly before I start the quick breakdown on this, I literally never knew until today that his nickname was Durkin. I don't know whether I've just missed that or whether it's a new nickname for him, but I've genuinely never heard his nickname Durkin before. So
it's been around for a while, that man.
Yeah, I've never heard it before, which is surprising, because I've seem to have seen and heard an awful lot in MMA.
You've got to be a big fan of Patrick Cummins to know that. I'm a big fan. Posters on the wall, T-shirts, round 5 figure of him. Yeah, I've got them all, man.
I could see it now. I can imagine that Patrick Cummins tattoo on your arm as we speak.
I've even got his stick-on moustache.
Excellent. Well, you'll be pleased to know then, as a huge Patrick Cummins fan, that I'm actually picking him to win this fight. I mean, I think if you look up sloppy in the dictionary, I think this fight will come under the definition of it, because I don't think it's going to be a hugely entertaining technical brawl, to be honest. I think that Cummins is going to utilise his wrestling well against which is his bread and butter, against Ed Herman. Now, Ed Herman's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but he's coming into this fight having lost 4 of his last 5. His win came over Tim Boach. But when you look at some of the guys he's defeated, Trevor Smith, Rafael Natal, okay guys, but they're going back several years. Patrick Cummins, I know he's coming in off the back of 2 losses, but they're against much higher level opponents, Misha Serkinov and Corey Anderson. He was the last guy to beat Jan Blachowicz before Blachowicz went on that little run, which obviously was ended recently by Santos. But that was only back in 2017. Of course, he edged out that close decision against Jean Volante as well. But yeah, I just think Patrick Cummins' wrestle heavy style will be able to score in points in the judges' eyes in this fight. And I think he'll be able to spend some time on top of Ed Herman, landing some ground and pound, doing enough to keep the fight on the mat and to stop the ref standing them up. So yeah, for me, I think Patrick Cummins is going to win this in what's going to be a scrappy, ugly fight. But Cummins for me is going to get the win via decision.
Man, I'm not even joking. I fucking love this fight. I'd have had it on the Showtime Fights if I knew it wouldn't lose me subscribers. But yeah, man, it's going to be a really good fight in my opinion. It's going to be sloppy. It's probably going to be ugly at times. But I just love the fight. I think they'll both throw down on the feet. And the weird thing is with this fight, and it sounds so strange to even say this out loud, but both fighters' durability is crazy once they're hurt and rocked. Like, you can hurt and rock these guys quite easily, but actually fucking putting them away once they're hurt and rocked is just a completely different story, especially Pat Cummins. Like, the amount of fights that Cummins has won because he's almost Homer Simpson his opponents. He's unbelievable. And that's one of the reasons why I love him. The second reason why I love him is a D1 wrestler. He's a grinder. He's a dirty, ugly grinder. And man, I'll do anything for those guys in MMA, you know. And I think that's ultimately how this fight's going to play out. You know, Ed Herman is good from bottom, like you've mentioned, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He does throw up submissions from bottom, triangles, arm bars. Pat Cummins definitely has to watch out for that when he's on top and when he's grappling. But I think the longer the fight goes on, the more and more that Cummins is wearing on him on top. I think the more tired that Herman will get. Once he's more tired, Cummins will be able to start passing more easily. Once he's out of the full guard of Herman, then obviously the arm bars and triangle submissions from bottom that were going to be thrown up aren't going to be as much of a danger anymore. And well, they're not going to be there when he's in half guard or side control or mount. So he just has to get out of that guard. I think he'll be able to do it. Like I say, I think it's going to be fun on the feet for as long as it lasts on the feet. I think it is ultimately going to end up on the mat. I'm all there for wrestling. I'm all down for that. I think Cummins is just going to put an NCAA show on him. I've got Pat Cummins to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. Now in the next fight, the last quick fire fight, we've got Zach Cummins versus Trevin Giles. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting fight because I've always liked Zach Cummings, and obviously since he's made that move up in weight class as well to middleweight, he got the victory over Trevor Smith. He said that he's feeling a lot better, a lot stronger, a lot more gas in the tank. And he's going up against an interesting opponent, Trevin Giles, obviously undefeated, 11-0. Won his last fight against Antonio Neto in round 3. Obviously, that was Neto's first fight for 3 years, so it's hard to really judge where he was. James Bogdanovic in the fight before that, in his UFC debut, he he beat him up with the ground and pound, some brutal ground and pound in that fight. And both these guys are good wrestlers, decent wrestlers. Zach Cummins, probably his strength is his wrestling and his submission game. He's decent on the feet. He can put you away. We saw that against Dominic Steele back in Zagreb a couple of years ago. But yeah, ideally, I think he'd like to be on top and working his ground and pound, his submission game. Trevin Giles, I think he's the slightly better of the two when the fight is standing. Again, he likes to wrestle. He took Bogdanovic down to get the ground and pound. He took Neto down in that fight against him as well. He showed a really nice crisp jab against Neto in that fight as well, and he had the gas in the tank to finish it in round 3. I'm going with Trevin Giles to win this fight. I think he's going to edge it slightly. Like I said, I am a big fan of Zach Cummins. I do like him, but I just think Trevin Giles is I think that ground-wise, I think they're similar fighters. If Zach Cummins can get Giles down early and spend some time in top control and nullify Giles on the bottom, then he could edge his decision. He could sway the other way. But ultimately, I think that a lot of this fight will be played out on the feet, and I think Giles is the better of the two strikers. It's going to be a close fight, but I think Trevin Giles is just going to edge this and get a decision victory.
Yeah, I think it's a really tough fight to call this because we've got Zach Cummins, who I really wasn't too impressed with moving up in weight in his last fight. Now, again, like I mentioned with Kevin Lee right at the start of this podcast, that could have just been the fact that he was just, adapting to having slightly more weight. But I'm not totally convinced it was that. I think Zach Cummins has been around the game a long time now, and I do feel that again, I don't want to say he's on a decline, but he's definitely past his peak. And it's very difficult because on the opposite side of the cage, we've got Trevin Giles, who I still believe is a little green. I still feel that he needs that step up in competition. He still needs to, like I say, just challenge himself a little bit more inside the cage, which in actual fact is exactly what he's doing in this fight. So, for the questions I've got on Trevin Giles, what is he like against that veteran? What is he like when he finally steps up in competition? Actually, I can't answer those questions until after this fight. I think the wrestling is gonna sort of be quite even in this fight, but like you've said, John, I don't see the fight hitting the mat too much, if at all. I do think the majority of the fight, or like I say, all of the fight is going to take place on the feet. And I just think that neither guy, I think Zach Cummins is tough. I don't think Trevin Giles is going to be able to knock him out. And I also think Trevin Giles is tough, and I don't see Zach Cummins getting a knockout either. So I do see this fight hitting the scorecards. And then when you go to the scorecards, you're going to be looking at volume, movement, who's going to be fresher. And just from what I've seen, I just feel that guy is going to be Trevin Giles. So I'm going to take Trevin Giles to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And that's it for this week's podcast, guys. So, John, before we hit the Newsome MMA mentions, what do you need to mention, man?
Yeah, just as always, keep checking out any of the content I'm putting out on the Newsome MMA website, YouTube, and yeah, there's always some great stuff on there, whether it's myself, yourself, any of the other guys on the team. There's always some great stuff on there, getting down to the live events and getting interviews and everything like that. So make sure you check that out, because there's a lot more to the Newsome MMA YouTube channel than just this podcast. So yeah, make sure you check that out. And of course, just hit me up on Twitter at MMA and me. I'm always happy to talk fights with any of you MMA fans out there. So it's always great to hear your different opinions and get all your thoughts on news and events, everything like that. So yeah, hit me up on Twitter at MMA and me.
Awesome. Now for the Newsome MMA mentions. First of all, I want to mention the Newsome MMA website. Don't forget to visit the website at newsomemma.co.uk, where you'll find my MMA betting section, which will provide written betting advice for 2 to 3 of the fights that were in the quickfire round in this podcast. You'll also find the locally famous tape index feature, prediction videos, fighter interviews, and the content collaboration with Heavy Duty Fight Management too. You can even request colour commentary and media coverage from Newsome MMA as well. The next mention is a long-term sponsor of Newsome MMA, which is CBD Life UK. CBD is an amazing product and something that I use myself. Thousands of professional athletes also use CBD too. And at CBD Life UK, they've got a wide variety of products to suit the needs of any customer. You can go to cbdlifeuk.com and use promo code Newsome MMA to also get 15% off your order. And that's it from us, guys. We're on a week break, so we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night.